Winx Club was a beloved show a lot of us grew up watching about friendship and being brave. On the other hand, the characters in the Netflix adaptation of the show, Fate, the Winx Saga, were usually pretty selfish most of the time. It's not that surprising to hear that the show has been canceled. Anyway, let's go back and remember the worst things each main character in the Netflix series has done. Let's get right into it. First up, Stella. Out of all of the characters in the Winx Saga, Stella was probably the one that was the most different from the original show. In the very first few episodes of the first season, Stella was pretty much the school's mean girl. She always had a mean comment or two to say, kept herself at a distance from her roommates, and always had a need to be the center of attention. At least, that's what she wanted everyone around her to think. In reality, she cared a lot about the people she loved, but the emotional abuse she faced through years of getting manipulated by her mother made her show her own emotions in pretty toxic ways, and that resulted in her fueling her powers through her own negative emotions. This is definitely the worst thing Stella's done on the show. To be able to use her powers, she's constantly clinging to those negative emotions, which makes her mean-spirited all the time. Not to mention, she lost control of them once before the events of the series even happened, when she literally blinded her best friend. And yet Stella believes that holding on to these negative traits means that her power will be increased. Unfortunately, it has the opposite effect on her. It makes her very, very unstable. We can see more proof of this when she shares her secret with Bloom to help her tap into her fire magic. Later on, we watch as Bloom lacked control when it really counted against a burned one. Next up, Sky. If we had to fit Sky into one trope, it would be the perennial nice guy. Honestly, he really just wants what's best for everyone, and while he might tease Riven every once in a while or get annoyed by what he's doing, he never completely turns his back on his friend, even when Riven started acting like a completely different person after he meets Beatrix. Now, even though he usually means well, the biggest thing that he did wrong on the show was when his mentor asked him to spy on Bloom, and he did it. The two were pretty close at the time, and still Sky agreed to note Bloom's actions and report everything back to the teachers because they were apparently worried about her stepping out of line. Unfortunately, this was exactly what made Bloom keep on stepping out of line.
So do it. We're stuck on campus 24/7, Bloom. We can't even walk in the hallways.
Coming up, Musa. In the original animated series, Musa is the fairy of music, but in the live-action remake, the character is now a mind fairy, and she just listens to music to block out all the noise. Now, she's pretty much an empath, someone who can sense the emotions of others, and always knowing what other people are feeling constantly can get pretty overwhelming for her. As a result, she tries to shut everyone out around her so she doesn't have to deal with their emotions. Now, while that decision definitely makes sense, it also makes it really hard for Musa to make connections with other people properly, especially with her roommates. And that's her biggest flaw, shutting out her roommates so she doesn't have to know what they're feeling. For example, in their first interaction with each other, Tara and Musa got off on the wrong foot because Tara thought she was just being rude to her. Not to mention when Musa tried to keep her relationship with Tara's brother a secret so she didn't have to deal with Tara's emotions if she ever found out.
What do you want, Sam?
Getting a drink, relax.
Following up, Tara. When we first heard about the Winx remake, a lot of us were expecting to see Flora, a fan-favorite character for many. Instead, Fate, the Winx Saga, presented us with her cousin, Tara. While she was still an Earth Fairy with a specialty in plants, there were some other changes too. For example, her powers might actually be one of the strongest out of all her roommates, and yet she's so underconfident that she only uses them when she's pushed to her extremes. And this is definitely Tara's fatal flaw. She usually positions herself to be less important, which is definitely a shame. Especially when Stella's around, not wanting to make waves. Even when Stella makes fun of her, Tara usually chooses to stay silent instead of standing up for herself. Like we mentioned earlier, it's only those few moments when she's pushed to her extremes and is confident in her actions when we see her true side, like in that big season-ending battle when we saw Tara take a leadership position and start giving directions to the others. To sum it up, the worst thing Tara did on the show has always been aimed at herself.
We're harmless and we should be happy that you're even talking to us. But sometimes we've had a really soil, sand, rock, and all manner of
Moving on, Bloom. Honestly, the character that Fate the Winx Saga did the most injustice to was Bloom herself. In the original series, Bloom was a really caring, confident, and brave fairy who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself and her friends. But in the show, they completely turned her character by making her a really, really selfish person that constantly put herself first and then people she claimed to love after. As a result, Bloom's done a lot of really bad things on the show, and most of those bad things were because she was so obsessed with learning the truth of her past. Even when it put everyone everyone else in danger. And while there's a lot to choose from here, the worst thing Bloom did on the show was definitely when she freed two of the worst people on the show, Beatrix and Rosalind. Bloom was so consumed by the desire to find out who her real parents were and what happened to them that she didn't care that she was letting out two fairies who were responsible for killing other people and were set on killing more to get what they wanted. She only cared about what she wanted, and so she didn't take into account the big picture. And that was what endangered the school again and again, and it is definitely her biggest sin throughout the course of the show.
Everything about you, where you grew up, what sports you played as a little kid.
Now for Aisha. To be honest, the one character that the show somewhat got right is Aisha. She's actually the most solid, or maybe even the only solid character in the entire series who isn't motivated by her selfish desires, and she's constantly putting other people ahead of her first. Even when she first met Bloom, who was no doubt rude to her, she still looked out for her, even when it came at her own expense. Heck, this water fairy even saved Bloom's life not that long after meeting her, so it's actually pretty hard, for the first time on this list, to pick out what the worst thing she did on the show was. But if we had to choose, within the context of the show at least, the worst thing Aisha did was when she revealed her friend's plans to the headmistress. And while it was definitely the right course of action, it did drive a wedge among the group. In reality, what Aisha did was really brave and thoughtful, as no matter how capable her friends thought they were, the reality was that they really weren't able to protect themselves from magical threats heading right in their direction.
Stop channeling.
Finally, Riven. Riven is definitely one of the most annoying characters on the show. He was on the animated series too, to be honest, but he's also a really interesting one too. And one of the most interesting reveals about this character was that before the events of the series started, those two were actually pretty good friends. And that was back when he felt like an outsider. It was Terra who befriended him. Of course, things took a really drastic turn when Riven came back to school the next year and started treating Terra like total garbage. Even worse, he also started to find solace in his outsider status with Beatrix. And this is no doubt the worst thing Riven did on the show. He turned on Terra. In fact, when Terra made a new friend in the new kid, Dane, he also started encouraging him to do the same, and while siding with Beatrix is arguably way worse. Still, it's Riven's decision to suddenly alienate Terra that led him to becoming absolutely obsessed with Beatrix in the first place. Even through to Season 2, we watched as Riven still sided with Beatrix, even knowing that she was looking for Rosalind this entire time, and he still constantly antagonized and made fun of Terra the entire time. And so while helping a villain in the series was definitely wrong, it was even more wrong to turn on a friend for no reason.
Walking red flags.
He's like one giant red flag.
And that's a wrap for this video. Do you think Winx the Fate Saga should have been renewed for another season? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.